G'day folks, and welcome to this continuation of the Tora scenario. This follows on from the first Axis turn from November-December 1941. I've ran through the Allied turn from that season, and then both turns from January-February. So we're currently at the start of March-April, or the spring season in 1942. And I just want to do a video to sort of summarize what's been happening. So the first thing that happened, following on from that last video, is the Western faction turn, their seasonal phase. They play Pacific Mobilization, and this places a couple of important units in their delay box and a couple of replacements. Not a lot, one infantry step for the British and the US. Now the British built an Australian colonial unit down in Townsville. The Americans built a one-step infantry, which they placed, I think in their, you can see in their Western US box way up there. Not a lot they can do with them right now. Way up in the top right there. That one-step infantry. The biggest problem that I'm realising the Allies have is their lack of troop convoys. So there's not a lot they can do. So the Allies go through their replacement segment, their administrative phase. There are no political events. Their support segment, they have no support to place. They do have one CV fleet remaining, but there's not much they can do with that. They're kind of saving this for an important CV strike down the track. No beachheads or convoys to place in that first turn, I'll point out. Then they go through operational movement, and there's a little bit of movement up in China. A couple of kind of Chinese forces just reshifting around the line to try and strengthen their defences. Doing quite well here, I'll point out as well. They're not attacking, and the Indians also moving down. This was, of course, after two turns, but they're gradually moving down through Bangladesh towards sort of Rangoon and that area, towards Siam. Combat phase was pretty quiet for the Western powers. No combat taking place. I don't think there was any reserve movement. And then the final administrative phase was pretty quiet as well. There was, of course, the end of turn phase, where we have the delay segment. And the Allies rolled very well. They do get during the delay segment, you roll for every unit in the delay box. And this is modified by various things, mainly, at this stage, the USCL track, which is currently on 1, which provides a +1 modifier for axis delay and a -1 for the Western powers. So this means that the Western powers forces are coming onto the board quicker, and they did very well by getting a few of their troop convoys into their support units. They got another surface fleet made available. And whereas the Axis powers, with their +1 modifier, all their units come on much later. So there's kind of a disparity there. The Western powers are getting their forces back on the board quickly. The Axis are not. And then the game turn segment, marker segment, removes a lot of those things. We then move through to January-February 1942 in the Axis first turn. And of course they have an ongoing political event. Basically, during, this is the seasonal phase only, but then during the administrative phase of these non-seasonal turns, you continue to play the political event. So Operation Z continues to happen in each non-seasonal turn, which means that once again, the Japanese can declare war or make a diplomatic incident roll. They opted to they could have declared war on Netherlands East Indies. They opted not to. There's no objectives here. Again, if this was a large campaign, yes, they might do. But for this particular scenario, they want to hold on to what they have. So they rolled for a diplomatic incident. They rolled a 6, I think, to roll on the colonialism table. But on that, there was a conflicting plans, no results. So that was a bit of a waste. Nonetheless, they did get their 6 Z actions once again. And what did they do? Well, they placed a Totsugeki marker up again in China, in Jiangsu. They placed another one down in Singapore. This was a bit optimistic at the time, thinking they might attack Singapore, which blitz enables the units in the area. Then they did a harbour attack to remove that recently re-arrived US, I think it was the US surface fleet, a Western Powers surface fleet as well, I can't remember. And then they got a bit ambitious. You can see up in the right here, they place, this is a turn I've just ran through, they place an SNLF beachhead on Midway. They, with plans to attack Midway. Again, this is not required. It's a, what's it called, a Western Strategic Hex. I think they're just scaring the Western powers at this stage. It was quite ambitious. So they could, as a Z action, they could place this beachhead marker, and then they can place the support convoy. Sorry, just double checking the rules there. They can, there's a key port here, Wake Island, so they can place a scratch supply convoy in that international dateline C zone. I think this is where it gets a bit tricky because normal supply convoys, flicking through the rules, double checking all this kind of stuff, quite possibly getting something wrong. So standard convoys can be placed in a naval zone that contains a home country port, a port of a dependent, or a friendly escort troop convoy. And they must be able to trace a fleet unit path. But scratch convoys can be placed only in the convoy's box of a naval zone containing a key port, which is basically this little boat below Wake Island that contains a friendly detachment. It doesn't need to trace a fleet unit path. So I think that's legal, which means I think they can trace supply to Midway, which means I think that the SNLF can place their detachment and seize Midway as part of that Z action, which is another strategic hex. And they've done something similar down here. They placed a scratch supply convoy to supply their advance on Port Moresby. Basically this unit, you may recall, it arrived, then they advanced, and then in January or February they advanced to Ley, and then they they made an attack on Port Moresby against the Allied detachment in that city, which because it's an detachment, it's automatic. But of course they need to be supplied. I think they would otherwise, without this supply convoy, they would not be able to draw supply back because they get 2 free hexes, 1, 2, and neither of these are eligible supply routes. If they were in Ley, they could draw 2 supply to Rabaul, but down here in Port Moresby, they actually need a dedicated fleet. And this makes sense historically as well, because these units couldn't draw supply very well across the mountain ranges. Port Moresby was a main supply port on southern Papua. So yeah, they've done that, and they need to keep, my thinking is they need to keep these supply convoys up. These convoys keep disappearing. And one thing I'm kind of learning here is that maybe I've pushed too far in taking Midway. Maybe I just didn't need to do that. A little over ambitious. This is my main priority. This is certainly an important supply convoy. That's just being a bit over ambitious for this scenario with the scratch convoys that I have. What else has been happening? Okay, so I placed another troop convoy here to send a unit. I spent a Z action to do an action which is, I think, rapid relocation of troops or words to that effect, which lets me move a one-step unit. Surprise troop movement, move a single-step ground unit from any hex in Japan to a hex in a Japanese dependent. So they've moved some reinforcements up to here. This is not, where is it? This is not a Japanese dependent. So they moved to here. I had a troop convoy here, and they were able to, in fact, they should go back to there now. They were able to convoy across the sea zone. This is before the Australians were here, of course. To reinforce Rabaul. The plan initially was to help them advance on Port Moresby. The situation has now changed. What else? Some infantry advancing across to Maduro and the Marshall Islands to be near the southeast Pacific sea zone. And of course, over in Malaya, the Japanese advancing down the peninsula, not making it very far, because so they can move into an enemy zone of control during normal movement, and friendly units negate that enemy zone of control during normal movement. But during the reserve movement phase, these units cannot move into an enemy zone of control, and it cannot be negated. No movement into enemy zones of control under any circumstances during that reserve movement phase. So they just have to stop short in Katabaru, and they'll be able to move up and attack next turn. And I was tempted to attack. I think I would have, with the headquarters here, 3-2 odds. Net 3-2. But I've only got a one-step unit here. I didn't really want to waste them. Next turn, I'll have far better 3-1 odds. So I'm just going to save my my steps for that much more powerful attack. So, and then the Japanese attacks. They had a blitz marker, well, the Totsugeki marker up in Kiangsu. They suffered, in their first blitz combat, an AD result. I think they rolled a 6 for combat. That was a very bad result. So they lost their armor. And then during regular combat, they suffered an exchange result. So they're losing the battle up here. And this is even before they get to their objective hex, Kuilin. So they're still a long way away. I thought that would be relatively easier. So still, nonetheless, the Japanese have captured Wake Island and Port Moresby. That's their objectives for this scenario. So they're on track to win the scenario, unless the Allies can do something. Thus, in the Western Powers turn for January-February, the Australians placed a troop, called the Allies, placed a troop convoy here, and the Australians moved from Townsville to Bougainville. This, of course, historically happened much, much, much later. Well, they were sitting in Townsville, and I figured, from the Western Powers perspective, looking at this scenario, they can't just sit back and let the Japanese have Rabaul and win the scenario. So they are being very ambitious and landed here, and then used their reserve movement to advance another space. They are not in the enemy zone of control because of that naval all-sea hex side here. So yes, threatening Japanese hold on Rabaul. The same thing happening over in Johnston Island. You can see the American troop convoy here, sending some a one-step infantry to Johnston Island. The problem, the Australians are here. They can island hop towards Rabaul. The Americans are hoping, they're really hoping to get a troop convoy back as soon as possible because they have nothing else. Unless they get another troop convoy, that one-step infantry is stuck on Johnston Island. And again, this is, it reflects the historical situation where the Americans in January 1942 are in no position to counterattack. But, trying to give the Japanese a run for their money in this short 4-turn scenario. What else happened in the Allied turn? Not a great deal more. I don't think the Chinese forces moved much. They are the Indians. This is probably the main movement here. They have moved into Siam, threatening Bangkok and threatening these 2 colonial steps here. They have very low offensive capabilities, but if they roll well, they can recapture Siam and threaten all these Japanese forces here. So the Japanese are, they want to roll well in their upcoming attack on Singapore. So yeah, again in the delay segment, the Allies rolled pretty well. They did get the Pacific Surface Fleet back again, and a Commonwealth supply convoy, and the Americans get their supply convoy back next turn, which will be the last turn. So yeah, halfway through the scenario now, and some very interesting developments.